Hi folks, I'm putting this brief clip at the beginning of this series of updates on the living room. This is after the fact of many that you're going to see here because they've been over the last several weeks. But I just wanted to kind of fill you in on the progress. So as you watch the subsequent videos, you'll see things progress along to the point where we are now. So I won't take more time to talk about that because I just did a video that'll go on to the tail end of this one. That will tie everything together. So thank you for watching. Alright, the latest update on our living room wall project. As you can see, I've made more progress since the last time. I've got more of the insulation filled in, working my way down to the end of the wall. And then I fabricated a new piece of chair rail to replace the old one that I had to rip out of there. And got a big sheet of drywall here in the biggest wall section. Fortunately, it was a good enough size, or a small enough size, shall we say, that I didn't need to put more than one piece of drywall here. So all I have as far as spackling goes is to do the screw holes, the screw heads. So I didn't have to put any tape on and do a joint, so that's good. I'm glad of that fact. I've also got a couple pieces of the T111 on, as you can see. It doesn't look too bad. It trimmed around the windows fairly well. It's not as perfect as I'd like, but we'll get some moldings if I need to. I have to get some, have to put underneath the chair rail and then the apron there on the window box a piece of quarter round to finish it off. I plan to do that, and then a piece of quarter round under here, and then of course the other window box and so on. So I've got the quarter round. I just need to put that on. That's kind of a final trim touch to finish it off. It also gives some extra support underneath the chair rail. If there be any pressure on it to push on it, it'll support that a little bit better too. So, and as you can see, I've drilled a hole through the wall, through the T111, fished my wire out for my baseboard electric heater. I've measured it so that it will line up centered under the window, which is what you want basically. It's a 4-foot unit. And I just have to wire that in. It's relatively simple wiring. On the end of the unit there, actually in either end, you can open up the box. It's one little screw, and then you can make your connections there, so it can be mounted with the feed coming in from either side. So this is fairly simple. It's the end of the run, so there's only one wire there, and like I've shown you before with electric wiring, black to black, white to white, ground to ground. That's all it is, with it being 220 volts. Both the black and white wires are hot. The white isn't a neutral. That doesn't make any difference as to how you connect it. You want a good solid connection, and wires twisted together, and wire caps, wire nuts on, so that there can't be any possible shorts happening. And then I will run a couple screws through the metal housing of the baseboard unit into the wall to hold it in place. I've marked on the floor where my upright pieces like these are, that you see there between the insulation, are located. So I will be mounting it to them, not just this thin T111. So it won't be flimsy. It'll be a good solid mount there, so that if somebody should step on it or what have you, kids fooling around or dogs fooling around, it won't come loose or rip away from the wall or what have you. It shouldn't happen, but you never know. You're moving furniture around, you might bump into it, or running a vacuum, you might bump into it. So you want it to be good and solid, that it can't move, and that'll be the case with what I'm going to do. So then my next move will be, I've got to continue running my T111 across here. It's about 16 feet this wall, so I'll have two more pieces. They're 4 feet wide. Of course, when you cut them, I have to put an electric box in there, as you can see, and then I have to work my way down to the end where that light switch is. I've got to put a receptacle in below that, redo the light switch, and do some more insulating and so on. But that's the final step. I'm working my way to that putzing around part of the job, and then that will conclude it. So I also have another heater, as you can see, to put under this window. So that's where we stand now. I will probably just make this part of a longer video rather than an individual one, and I'll come back to you when more of this is done so you can see how it'll finally look. Now, for right now, this is just bare T111. It's unfinished. That's the way my wife liked it. She likes the lighter color. I think at some point what I'll at least be doing here will be to at least cover it with a polyurethane to seal it, because it shouldn't just stay raw like this. I mean, this is actually an exterior plywood that you would put on, say, a shed or a barn or something, and then you'd paint it out there. But it also is great for rooms where you get wall contact, like basement rec rooms and things like that, because it's hard. It won't dent like the drywall. It won't crack like regular paneling. So it is usable inside too, and that's why we're using it. But I just like to finish it off a little bit better. We want the lighter color down here. We don't want to paint it dark because it's a dark semi below grade living room. So we don't want, and so there isn't a whole lot of light that comes in. We have a couple windows here, but we don't want the room to be any darker than need be. That's why on the other wall over here, like we showed you before, the top was painted kind of a yellowish orangish color, and then the bottom we just kept plain. I will probably paint the chair rail that same barn red. That has kind of been my theme. I'm using that on the chair rail. You can see I did that on the beams. It's actually the same stuff I painted the bridge with out there. It's not an expensive paint, but it gives it a country look. So that's our goal here. We want this to be a country farmhouse. So this rough cut T111 makes it look a bit more authentic, we think. So we'll see how that goes. But my wife's the interior decorator. I just have to do the work. So we'll come back to you when more of this is done. Thank you for watching. Another update on the living room remodel. As you can see, I've basically gotten this wall recovered here. I got the T111 on the bottom. Electric heaters are in place. All the wiring is done. I ended up here having to do a double light switch and a receptacle. Part of the reason for that was the amount of wires that I had to fish into the box were too many, because I had to use a more shallow box because of the depth I had to the stone wall. So if I'd have just done a two gang box, I don't think I'd have been able to get everything in. But going 3 gang and then just the receptacle tapped off, I didn't want to put a dead light switch in there. That made no sense. But what I can probably do eventually here is just plug in a little night light, so if anybody walks into the room in the dark from the outside, you'll know exactly where the light switch is. It still wasn't quite deep enough, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a wood like frame around there and mount the cover plate right over that, so that'll give me an extra depth. I've got the space to do that. It'll be like a little trim accent. I'll probably paint it this dark red, like this new chair rail is. So that's where we are there. The next thing here is going to be to start taping and then painting the drywall. I have these little spaces over top of the windows and the door here to do, but that won't take long. Now I'm wanting to show you another phase of this back wall here. I just pulled off the old masonite paneling. You remember there was that kind of paneling, and if you've looked at some of our other updates. And then behind that was that sheet aluminum that was supposed to be reflective and to hold the heat in. So with this wall, I'm not going to go to the extent that I did with that other one, just because I don't have to. There's no electrical in the upper part of this wall at all, nor do I plan any. And also, this wall is no longer an exterior wall. There was an addition put on to the house, probably the early 1900s, so that's not a cold wall anymore. But I still will insulate it a little bit just to hold the heat, so that in the wintertime the heat doesn't get out to the stone, you know, and cause it to sweat. I'm not going to chip off all the plaster. In fact, I'm just going to leave all this old wallpaper right on here. So it's kind of a reminiscence of what the house was at one time. You can see the pattern and the design there with a little, looks like a little country church there, and then the potted plants and the different colors. There's probably some official name for this style of wallpaper. I don't know. I don't know how old it is. It's certainly pre-1970s, because that's when this masonite was put on, early 1970s. I remember that, and I remember this old wallpaper as a child. So how long that was on before, I don't know, maybe 30s, 40s. I have no way of knowing. So what I'm going to do here, to make it simple on myself, I'm not going to rip down all this wood framework and start from scratch. All that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my styrofoam insulation into pieces, fit it into the squares here, so to speak, and then I'm just going to throw one piece, and one piece will work because it's not quite 8 feet, one piece of drywall on here, and then you know, run screws into it, and it'll be ready to be taped and painted. So that'll make a no muss, no fuss top part of the wall here. It'll make it a whole lot easier. The bottom part, I'd like to do it the easy way, and if I can, I will. The problem is, if you look here, I put one new receptacle in when I was doing the work, wrapped it around the corner there and came into there. But I need another receptacle over on this side of the wall, close to the end, because that's where I plug in my fans for my stove. So what I'm going to do, if I can, I think it's an open channel underneath there. Hopefully, if I can get a fish tape from where that receptacle is to an opening I'll cut there, that I can run wire from one receptacle to the next, then it'll make it a whole lot simpler, because I'm not going to rip off all this old wainscoting. I decided that that's not necessary on this wall, because I don't have to run a lot of wires, and I'm not too worried about the insulation, just because, again, it's not a cold wall. So I'm just trying to save myself a lot of time, aggravation, and work. All I'm going to do is take the T111 and put it right over top of this. I'll tear off the base trim that I put on, and the piece of trim that's under the chair rail here, the old trim piece, the old quarter round, I'll have to rip that off so that I can tuck the new stuff in, and then I'll put a new piece of chair rail on top of, or a quarter round over that, and then just utilize the old chair rail that's there. All I'll do is repaint it to match the red that I've got going as my theme for in here, scuff up the old varnish a little bit so the paint will adhere, and then we'll go from there. So this wall will still maintain some of its original work, or early remodeling work I should say, underneath what I'm going to do. So anyway, dogs are acting up, so I will come back to you with the next update. So thank you for watching. Alright, just a quick further living room update. This wall is almost completed as far as the carpentry part of it. Still have to fool around with that little piece there to jockey it in. And then of course I've got to tape and paint the drywall, but there are no appliances or electrical outlets or anything on that wall, so that'll be fairly simple to finish off. No seams, just screw heads to tape. So that wall's just about completed. Got both receptacles in, both are hot, and they're ready to go now. That one will service the stove over here for the winter time. I decided that what I'm going to do is, just for I don't know, a feature in the living room, or just a way to reconnect to the past, I'm going to leave the older wainscoting on the chimney here. I'm not going to replace that. I'll just leave that the way it was. And the chimney itself, I still need to get more plaster off, and it needs some slight repairs, but I want it to look like a beaten up old chimney because it's an old house. So when that's all done, it'll be the chimney with the wainscoting that was on there, the original chair rail, and that'll be just a little feature to show a bit of the history of the house. I think it'll work all right with the rest of the color scheme and the rest of what we're doing, so that's not a problem. And well, you saw this wall before. Now I'll show you where I am over here today. This back corner of the room behind the main doorway coming in, I had taken off the paneling there and put styrofoam on when I was working on this wall, but I ripped everything else off. Now I've got the paneling off the top and the chair rail off the bottom. I'm down to basically the stone foundation, more or less. I've chipped most of the loose plaster and the loose mortar out of there. I couldn't just put the T111 over top of the wainscoting here because this is a cold wall. This goes to outside, as you can see. So I've got to do the best I can to insulate this wall before I finish it off. For the top section here, it's fairly tight and it's still got a lot of plaster on, so I'll just put the insulation board in between the framework there, the 1/2 inch. That'll give a fair amount of insulation there, I think. And then for the bottom part here, I've got several cans of that great stuff, spray foam insulation, to put in the crevices like I did on the other wall. Also underneath this windowsill here, it's all open under there. I can kind of feel up in there. So I've got to get as much spray foam under there as I can to make sure that that's that's insulated. A lot of cold air can leak in through here if I don't do that. So, and then after that's done, I will do a little bit of 1x framing on the bottom part there, enough to be able to get good nailing. I'm going to put one receptacle, maybe 6 to 10 inches to the left side of the window there. It'll sort of be back in the corner, but if you'd ever need it for something, it's there. I'm going to do like I did in the other window boxes. I will cut into this one like I did and put a receptacle there in case you want to plug anything into the window. And then I think I am going to put a little 2-foot electric strip heater here on the bottom. Add this to the rest of the room. Since again it's an outside wall, you typically want your baseboard heaters by the outside wall, so the cooler air kind of blows the warm air into the room that way, with your convection sequence that you want for that kind of heating system. So I'm gonna run a wire for that, and then I will put my foam board insulation over that, and then the T111 below the chair rail there, and below the chair rail there, wrapping the corner, and then the upper part above the chair rail, like I did everywhere else, will be drywall. So it's just 2 small pieces there, no real cutting, no real seams. I'll have a back corner there, but what I'll probably do is just put one application of tape, and then I'll put maybe a piece of wood trim in the corner there to finish that off a little nicer. So things are coming along. I just wanted to give you an update. I wanted to record this so that I remember. You can see the quality of the stonework that was done there. They're just stacked stones, but they were sort of faced on this side so that they're flat. Again, this is one of my ancestors, when how they did this, or exactly when they laid the house out. I'm not sure of all the details. It was, as best I know, 1870, but this is the kind of stone foundation that this house has all the way around. You can see from the depth of the window box, it's about 1.5 feet thick. So we're going to try to make this a bit more cold weather resistant than it's been, insulate it better so that it keeps the cold out and the drafts and things like that, and hopefully that will make the heating more efficient in here. So we're just about done with this room then, except for finishing off the ceiling, and we'll come back to you with that. So thank you for watching. We'll be back with the next update. New update on the living room. As you can see, we have this short wall here that I had shown you before, pretty much finished as far as the remodel on it. I have the drywall is taped and ready for paint, so I'll be putting a prime coat and then an overcoat on that. I'm not worried about taping the corner there like you'd normally do with drywall, because I'm going to put a piece of molding in there, a piece of 1/4 round, and that'll also be painted dark red like the chair rail, so it'll kind of match the rest of the room. This old chair rail that I left on here will be repainted red to match the new color scheme too. So as you can see, I've got a receptacle there and a receptacle that I put in the window box. So now all 3 windows in the room have receptacles in the window boxes in case you want to put some kind of specialty lighting or what have you in there, maybe around Christmas time decorating, so that helps with that. Also, I did add the extra piece of electric heat. As you can see, about a 2.5 foot strip that's tied into the rest of the living room, and it's hot and ready to go when I need it in the winter, should I decide not to burn a fire, or in case for whatever reason we don't, we'll be all set with the electric heat. This wall where the TV was, as you can see, has been all taken off and redone. This was a plank wall, say 5/4 by 8-inch wooden planks. So I didn't take those off because it's partially weight bearing for the stairway that's beyond this. So all I did is I put the drywall and the T111 over top of the wall. As far as doing electrical on here, the problem is there's a closet here, so I don't really have a way to put receptacle through the wall there, and then the stairs go up on an angle like this, so I don't have a wall cavity there to put them in. What had been done here in the past is there was a surface mount quad box. You can see it there next to the thermostat. So I just utilized that again basically for the TV and so forth. I'll just run a maybe an outlet strip behind the TV, and then everything that we need to plug in there will be taken care of that way. So that was the easiest way to do it, rather than to try to fool around with wiring where I don't have a good wall behind the surface wall to run wires. So so that's just about ready for paint as well. I'm going to blend these in. Again, to save money, this wire mold here is the original stuff that was here. It dates back this to the 60s. This I'm not sure, but it's still good stuff, and it's new Romex in there. You know, as I put the junction boxes up there. So what I'm going to do is to make it blend in. This is going to be the final color of the wall, like our other wall over there, and the rest of the walls will be. So I'm just going to paint these and the surface mount boxes to match that. It's called Tickle Peach. That's the color my wife picked out. So so that will blend these in a little bit. They won't look so striking, but yet it's a practical way for me to be able to have my power sources here. This is about the only place in the room to put the thermostat. You don't want the thermostat directly close to an electric heat baseboard, or you get a false, you get a false reading and it won't kick on because there's heat running. You want it in a place where it's away from the other the other baseboards. So that had to go here, and you usually put the thermostat up high, about 5.5 feet off the floor, because heat rises, obviously. So when it gets chilly at that level, then the heat knows to kick on. So I'm just utilizing that again. Everything's grounded the way it should be. There are grounding screws in each of those boxes, and they actually feed up through that perimeter board there in the ceiling. So they're good and tight. They're not going anywhere. They're good and safe. So I'll just paint them to match, and then they'll blend in a bit. The other walls here, as you can see, are also taped, and I know everything's all torn up here, and are ready for a coat of paint. So things are coming along this week. I hope to have this finished. We'll have these walls done, and then we'll get the ceiling. I got 2 more light fixtures like these recessed LEDs, so I've got 3 to put in. 1, 2, and this one is the 3rd one. So the room will have all recessed lighting. I still have to go pick up a dimmer switch to work with these, because when the lights are at full power like this, it's much too bright for a living room. But there are times when you do want more light. So in a room configuration like this, having a dimmer switch is the way to go. And the new LEDs, you can get dimmer switches for them, so that's not a problem. I went with recessed lighting in here. It's not too traditional country, I realize, but again, as I think I've told you before, my issue here is I have a low ceiling. This ceiling above me is basically a little over 7 feet, so you don't want anything hanging down at all. That's why I went with the design I did with exposing the beams and putting the drywall in between to save some of the ceiling height. What was on here before I started this, the ceiling was actually 2 inches lower because it was furring, and then those tiles, those fiber tiles, white fiber ceiling tiles were in there. So that even made the room feel more claustrophobic because it dropped the ceiling down. So I couldn't just leave the stud or the joist channels open for more of a feeling of height because I had too many wires I had to run. So I had to cover them, but I at least wanted to recess in between the beams to cover them up, but it'll still give a bit more of a feeling of some height in here. And these light fixtures should be relatively maintenance free. They're the LEDs without the replacement bulbs in them, so who knows what lifespan I'll get out of them. But they were, I think, $20 some a piece at Home Depot. They were a good price, so that's what I decided to go with. So we're going to keep working on this until we can get this finished. We're still not sure what we want to do with the floor in here. The old floor is this heavy, I think it's yellow pine. It's not good enough to refinish because it's got too many places where there's a little bit of rot or divots and things like that. It can't be brought back. Other holes were drilled in the past for electrical and so on. I didn't want to go to the extent of ripping the whole thing out because that would have been a major mess and a lot of work. So I think what we're probably going to do, at least I had replaced the back part of this floor because it had rotted from flooding and things back in the 90s. It's got pressure treated lumber underneath it and plastic vapor barrier and pressure treated plywood, 3/4 inch plywood, and then on top of it is this 1/4 inch Luan. So I think what we'll do is we'll cover the floor with Luan and then decide where we want to go. Carpet would be the simplest thing, but that's always going to be dirty because of the wood stove and these dogs. So I don't know what we'll end up doing eventually with that, but for now I think we'll just cover it with Luan to make it a bit more finished, and then we'll decide when we find a product that we think will work for us and we like, then we'll jump on it at that point. So living room's coming along. I'll come back to you after I have my painting done. I have a couple little spots of drywall to put in over the window frames. You can see there where the insulation is. I don't know if I mentioned in the other update, underneath this wall, underneath the T111, I have the 1/2 inch foam board too, but in this section of wall I went through, was it eight cans of Great Stuff spray foam to fill all the voids in the foundation, stone foundation, and also underneath and on the left hand side of that window box it was all open behind the wood. So there was a significant heat loss there and cold air infiltration that I hope I've cured now. I stuck the nozzle, the hose tip of the Great Stuff in as far back in as I could and just kept spraying until it finally bubbled out. So I'm hoping that I've got that pretty well. I still have part of the stairway to remodel beyond this doorway, so when I get to that, then I'll insulate this right hand window box too. So hopefully that will significantly insulate this room better than what it had been. With an old stone foundation, it's not going to be too conducive to good insulation, but this is about the best I can do. I wasn't going to go through and mortar all the joints with the stacked stone, so this was the simplest way to do it. So at any rate, also then in all my corners I'm going to put 1/4 round trimmed in with this same barn red, but I won't put them in until we get the base molding on. I'll probably just go with 1x3. That's what I'm going to put around the ceilings, the tops of the drywall there. Will be a 1x3 trim board. It'll frame it out nicely, I think. But I can't really do any moldings until I get my flooring down. So the baseboards and the bottom corner trim will have to wait until I get the Luan down. It's a pain to try to put that stuff in with the baseboards in your way, so I won't do that. And it's going to be, you know, hassle enough to cut around it just for the electric heat baseboards. Normally in a normal new construction, the subfloor would have been all done before you put the baseboards in. You just would have had a wire sticking out of the wall until the finished electrical work would have been done coming back after the flooring was in. So I didn't do that, so I've got to work around it. Here on the edge here was a special problem because I have a raw edge of drywall, as you can see, and then there's the raw edge of the T111. I got a 90-degree wood molding. They make an inch and an eighth, a larger one, but I went with the smaller one. It's like a ½ inch on each side. I think that will cover it enough that you won't be able to see any raw edges, give it a finished look, and it wasn't all that expensive to do. So that'll add another nice touch, I think, to that and give it a finished off look. But that's after all the painting is done. So we'll show you that when we get to that as well. And then I've got other work that's going to have to be done in here. These old doorways, as I said before with the wainscoting, this is all that faux graining stuff and it's in rough shape. I'm going to chip off what I can of that, scuff up the old varnish, and then just paint the barn red color over top of that, and we'll see how that holds up. That shouldn't be too bad. Some of these old doors, it'll take me a while to get them completely finished, but once it's done, we should have a nice looking rustic living room here to enjoy, one that'll be warm and welcoming, not too dark, and a nice center of our house, even though it's on the ground floor level. So all right, we'll get back to you with another update. Thanks for watching. All right, the latest update on the living room project. As you can see, a good bit of the ceiling panels are in. It's just pieces of drywall, of course. They're not done by any means because I have to go over do all this little putsy little work and cover all the screw holes with spackle and then paint over, and then along the red there's a little bit of drywall residue on there from trying to fit the drywall as tight as I can in between, so I'll have to touch up red paint on them. But the other good thing is I have gotten all my recessed lighting now in. All 7 lights that I have for this room are in drywall. And I still have a few panels here that I have to get put up in. I haven't finished the ceiling quite yet, but we're getting there. There were also a few spots where I couldn't do recessed drywall. Like right here, there was a cross member beam, like a bridging between these beams, and then there was just a small gap up to the ceiling. So rather than trying to squeeze a piece of drywall up in there, I just capped it off with a piece of 1x lumber and painted it red. 1x, I think that was a 1x5 or something like that. I did the same thing over here. I had the same kind of corner, and there was no point in trying to get drywall up in there. I've got one more spot. It's a bit longer over by this, not this channel, but this one here to the end of the wall. I think the easiest thing there is just going to be to put a cap along there, paint it dark red. As you can see, I did manage to get insulation tucked up in there. And up in that channel, I already put some in this one. Haven't done anything with this one yet because that's where I need to run some wires up through the floor for a second floor electric heater, and also a second floor receptacle in the run that's up there. So this is my access point, so that's why I haven't finished that off yet. But as you can see, the room has become quite a bit more transformed. I have the perimeter board along the ceiling pretty much throughout the room now. It gives it a much more finished off look, as you can see. Haven't put all the pictures and things back up on the walls yet. And I still have that back corner of the room I haven't really finished. I've got to figure out how I want to finish trimming that out. So that's still to go. But you can see the color scheme there. I did touch up the paint on the chair rail. And what I still have to do in here is we've got to decide what we want to do with these window boxes. It still has the faux graining on the brown. I think what we'll probably do is just paint them red to match everything else. Again, I don't know what I want to do with these little built-in closet corner cabinets here. They were too nice of a feature to tear out just because it was part of an old remodel here, or maybe even the original house, I'm not sure. Has this antique clasp on to close it. That's where the old panel box in the house was. As you can see, that's where I kind of ran a lot of my wires, that they ran through there and then out through the wall. There was a hole in the wall where the main entrance cable came into the panel box, so it gave me an access to get out to the new panel box out on the porch. I have to take this plaster off this side of the chimney yet and repoint those bricks a bit just to improve the look of the chimney. As you can see, here's my other built-in cabinet. Also has this kind of antique lock on it, or latch on it. It's not a lock, it's just a latch. Excuse me, but I've got to deal with this corner and the doorway here, figure out how I'm going to trim that out. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to go so fast there. But the other feature I wanted to show you here with the lighting in here is I got a dimmer for these LED lights. Now these LED lights do not have bulbs in them. They're a sealed unit, has the LED diodes in it, so that when they fail, then the whole unit will have to be replaced. But it does make them also dimmable, which the cheaper LED light bulbs you buy in the store are non-dimmable. So, but this is a special LED dimmer. It's not the standard one like you'd use with incandescent lights. It's for CFLs and LEDs, and you can use it for incandescent, but I went with a cheaper one, a less noticeable one. It basically has the look of a regular light switch. Oops, there. But the dimming feature is just this little tab on the side here. What you can see, I don't know if I can zoom in enough to, there we go. And as I slide it down, you can see the light in the room dims. And it'll go down. It won't go all the way off, but they will go down to this dim. So it's something I definitely wanted to add in here, because obviously you want some ambiance in a living room. When you're watching TV, you don't want the lights on full strength, but yet if you're having a party in here, or you're cleaning in here, you do want the maximum lighting possible. You're doing some other kind of work in here, so this gives me the flexibility, this dimmer. It in a three-way switch, which this is because the other light switch is over on that wall, you only need one dimmer, of course, and I put it on this end. This is what's called a dead end 3. The only wire going in here is the 12-3 wire that's running from switch to switch, because this dimmer switch has a fairly large body behind it that will fit into that box. But if I had a lot of wires in there, it would have been difficult to get everything in, whereas here it made putting it in a whole lot easier. I just had to connect up the 3 wires to the screws on the dimmer switch, and then it fit in fairly easily. So if you're going to do this kind of a dimmer on a 3-way run, if possible, try to find the switch location that has the least amount of wires in, just because of the amount of switch that's going to have to push back in. It's a lot. It almost looks like the diameter, the square boxiness of it looks like the diameter of, say, an electric heat thermostat. So that's what you're dealing with. So you don't want to have a lot of other wires to try to shove in and get the thing in properly. So that's why I put it on this side. I still have little odds and ends to do over here. You can see the panels where I come to a dead end here, and then there are cleats on the sides of the beams there, and then a piece of drywall put on vertically to block the end off. So I still have to do something with that corner seam, and then the cover the screw heads, of course, and then that'll give it a finished off look. The beams, of course, run beyond the wall. They go back onto the foundation, but there was no sense trying to have these little pockets up in there in the ceiling, so I just filled those with insulation so that it'd be warmer and protect the house from from drafts and things like that. I also put insulation up in these. I didn't put the drywall pieces on this yet. I will probably hold off for a bit on that to finish it off, because this is where I'm running most of my house wires, the new wiring along that wall through there. And if for some reason I forgot one for upstairs somewhere, this would be the way to run it. So I still have access to get wire in there to get out to the panel box should I have forgotten one. I don't think I did, but rather than have the problem of trying to get another wire down to the panel box some other way, I'll leave these open for now until I'm sure that I'm done with running house wires. But at any rate, the living room's coming along. As I said, we still have to finish up the floor. We'll give you an update when we get to that point, whatever we decide to do. I really, really wish that this floor was in a little better shape, that I could just finish it off. But again, the problem is the back part I had to rip out and replace in the 90s because the back part was rotting. So there is no tongue and groove planking like here under there. Under that Luan is just 3/4 inch pressure treated plywood. So I wouldn't have a nice full floor like this anyhow. It would have been a beautiful country look if it was in better shape. Just finish it off and you know, fill in the gouges and so on. A nice yellow pine look to make a beautiful country looking floor, but it's just too far gone to do that, so I have to go to plan B. At any rate, we will give you further updates, but I'll probably tie this to the ones that you've already seen in this video, and then there'll probably be a final video when everything is done. So thank you for watching.